Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. So this weekend the wonderful Bellakor model went up for pre-order, so you can go and check out some awesome 360-degree views of him up on the Games Workshop website. But in addition to that, we also got a small leak showing off his stat line, so we now have a pretty decent idea about how tough he's going to be on the tabletop. As you can see on your screen now, Belakor comes in with a new degrading stat line, much like all of the other models that now have 10 or more wounds, and his degrading stats are movement, strength, and attacks, which, I will be honest, are pretty harsh ones to have reduced as you take wounds for a character that predominantly wants to be in melee, like that is where his strength lies. Losing movement and strength and attacks does seem quite crippling for a character like that, but it is not all bad in the case of Belakor, as we will see in just a moment. He comes in with a movement of 12 inches, ballistic and weapon skill of 2+, of course. Strength is a very nice 8, and he has an improved toughness of 7, a huge buff to his wounds, which have now doubled to 16, a massive 6 attacks, leadership 9, and an almost inconsequential but admittedly nerfed 6-up save. Now, you may also remember that when Games Workshop did their initial preview of Belakor a few weeks ago, they not only showed off his incredible Immortal Vigor and Shadow Form abilities, but they also gave us a look at his Blade of Shadows, which was Strength +4, -4 AP, D3 +3 damage. And it does look as though this was perhaps a mistake that they put up, as in his leaked datasheet, as well as incidentally in the corrected datasheet that they put out yesterday, due in fact to a slight mistake in the assembly instructions, I believe, on the model. But as you can see on this updated datasheet that they've given out so that people can get the correct assembly instructions, you can see it is in fact a strength +2 weapon. And I mean, it is a shame because this is very much a nerf on what we would have got and what we were expecting with a +4 strength weapon, but to counterbalance that, his strength stat did get a much needed improvement to go along with his increase in size, jumping from strength 6 to a base strength of 8. So in essence, it's kind of balanced out, and at the top bracket, he is still going to be strength 10, and even when you drop him to his lowest bracket, he's still strength 6 base, which is what he was before. So with his sword, he is still hitting at strength 8, and with -4 AP, ignoring invulnerable saves and doing D3 +3 damage per unsaved wound, he is pretty much going to absolutely annihilate anything he gets into combat with, being able to one-shot repulsors with relative ease at his top bracket, and even when he gets down into the bottom bracket, he should on average one-shot Guilliman, which, let's be honest, is absolutely incredible in terms of damage output. And on top of that incredibly strong focused swing, he does of course have the sweep profile of his weapon, which just uses his base strength but is still -3 AP and 1 damage, and he does double the attacks. So swinging with 12 attacks at full wounds, and even when he's nearly dead, still putting out 8 strength 6 attacks, which is pretty decent if your opponent is attempting to, I don't know, bog him down with a squad of orcs or gaunts. Overall, now that we've seen his profile, I think especially at the top bracket, he is quite possibly the scariest melee character in the game, and I would say he is even more terrifying than the Nightbringer. Now that we know that he has 6 attacks and he's strength 8 at his top bracket, so with his sword he's swinging at strength 10, 6 attacks, -4 AP, ignoring invulnerable saves, doing so much damage. He is absolutely devastating when he gets into melee, and with that 12-inch move and presumably fly, he will be able to get into melee relatively easy as well. It doesn't look like he has a shooting attack, so you can pretty much just be advancing him or running him every single turn to get him into combat as soon as you possibly can. And when you factor in as well that Bellakor is a Psyker and he has access to his own unique Noctic discipline, that should also hopefully help to make him even more survivable, perhaps with some abilities, or make him even killier, or make him faster so that he can potentially jump across the board. I'm kind of imagining Noctic to be something like the old Law of Shadows in Warhammer Fantasy, so some abilities that sort of buff his killiness, something that will help make him a bit more incorporeal, so he's harder to wound or harder to damage, and maybe something that will allow him to sort of teleport like a mist of like shade across the battlefield, so that even if he does get dropped down a bracket and his movement decreases, he can still pretty much get across the battlefield to wherever he needs to be without too much difficulty. I'm not going to go over his defensive abilities in too much detail, as we have covered them in an earlier video, but his toughness 7 and 16 wounds that he has now gained is obviously a massive glow up compared to how he was before, and whilst it's not the scariest profile in terms of survivability in the game, it does get exponentially better when you factor in the fact that he's got a 4-up invulnerable save, but arguably even more importantly, he's got -1 to be hit, attacks can't be re-rolled against him, and he's got that incredibly rare and very powerful -1 to be wounded by ranged attacks as well, which is going to mean that even things like las cannons and missiles are going to be wounding him on 4s, and lighter firepower like bolters is going to be wounding him on 6s instead of 5s, which is a absolutely massive increase to his durability. To put it into perspective, a full squad of intercessors rapid firing into him should do an average of 0.8 wounds, whilst even a squad of devastators with 4 las cannons only does just under 2 damage to him after all the wounds and saves have been made, which is pretty crazy durability all things considered. He is slightly more vulnerable in melee, as the -1 to wound doesn't come into play there, but with his decent 12-inch move that we've now seen, and presumably fly as well, he can pretty much pick and choose which combat he wants to get into, and if he does charge with 6 attacks at strength 10 at the top bracket, you know, doing D3+3 damage and ignoring invulnerable saves, he is pretty much going to wipe out whatever he charges into combat with 99% of the time before they can even swing. So you can pretty much choose what combat you want to go into and know that you should be relatively safe, because you can just kill whatever you charge at and not take any damage back when it's their turn to swing back into you. I think the profile overall is pretty much what I was expecting, to be honest. I was hoping for a slightly higher move, maybe 14 or something rather than the 12, but strength 8, toughness 7 and 6 attacks is genuinely a really strong profile, and I like the fact that he's 16 wounds rather than 18, so that he doesn't get that negative interaction when it comes to terrain. And whilst with his new big model, Belakor is going to be hard to hide all the time, it does mean that with 16 wounds, if you are able to get him behind some large obscuring terrain, he will be that little bit safer from some of your enemy's fire. So whilst 18 wounds would have been nice, I think overall that may have made him less survivable than putting him at 16, to be honest with you. As I mentioned, we don't know his points yet, but based on that profile as well as his abilities, if you compare him to something like the Nightbringer, I would say anywhere from about 350 to 400 points would, I think, be a reasonable guess. It puts him at around that kind of level, but adds perhaps a little bit more just because he is a Psyker and has access to this Noctic discipline. So that is it for today. What do you make of the Bellakor stat line? Do you think he is going to be a worthwhile addition with the stat line that we have seen today, or do you think that he is just going to end up being shot off the board before he can really do anything? And also, do you plan to pick up a Bellakor model, even if it is just to use as a painting project? Because let's be honest, he is definitely one of the most awesome looking models, I think, in 40k history. So he would be a great little centerpiece, even if you don't think he will see much play on the actual tabletop. But let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I will catch you later, guys.